Hello everyone! We have arrived in Barcelona, a dream come true. This is one of the most beautiful cities. In today's video, we will walk through the streets of Barcelona, visit the Ciutadella Park, see some churches and go to the zoo. If you like our videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel by clicking that subscribe button to find out even more interesting things about the next place you're thinking of visiting. Come with us to learn about the history of Barcelona. As we walk through the beautiful streets of the city, Barcelona is a port city located on the western side of the Mediterranean Sea and is part of the Kingdom of Spain. The city is located in the autonomous community of Catalonia, which is made up of 4 provinces: Barcelona, Girona, Lleida, and Tarragona. This province of Spain is one of the richest in the region, being an important tourist destination. By population, the city is the second largest in Spain, after the capital Madrid, and is located only 160 kilometers from the Pyrenees Mountains, which are on the border between Spain and France. Legend attributes the establishment of Barcino, in particular to Hamilcar Barca, the father of the famous Carthaginian leader Hannibal. Afterwards, the Romans transformed the city into a castrum, a Roman military base, centered on Mons Taber, a small hill near the current town hall, in the Plaza de San Jaume. This organization is still visible today on the map of the historical center, through the remaining fragments of the Roman walls. Important Roman remains are on display under the Plaza del Rey, the entrance to the city's museum, Museu d'Història de la Ciutat. The fortress was conquered by the Visigoths in the 5th century, by the Moors in the 8th century, reconquered in 801 by the Frankish kings, and plundered by Al-Mansur in 985. The city was devastated after the Catalan revolt that took place between 1640 and 1652, and in the War of Spanish Succession, which took place between 1701 and 1714. At the beginning of the 20th century, Barcelona once again became a cultural and political center after the revival of the Catalan culture. In the same century, during the Spanish Civil War, Barcelona was a refuge for the anarchist cause, but surrendered to the forces of General Franco in 1939. In the 1970s, again Barcelona revived, becoming the prosperous city it is today, one of the most cherished cities in Spain and in Europe. In order to be able to see as many tourist attractions as possible, we used the tourist buses that we recommend wherever you travel, and they are available. We generally use them to get an overview of the area we're visiting. We'll walk through the Gothic quarter, in Catalan Barigòtic or El Gòtic, which is the historical center of the old town of Barcelona. It stretches from La Rambla to Via Laietana, and from the shores of the Mediterranean Sea to the Ronda de Sant Pere. It is part of the Ciutat Vella district. The neighborhood encompasses the oldest parts of Barcelona and includes the remains of the city's Roman walls and some notable medieval landmarks. A large part of the current intertwining streets of this neighborhood, however, date from the 19th and the 20th century. Barigòtic retains a labyrinthine layout of the streets, with many small streets opening into squares. Walking through the area, our attention was drawn to the building of the Barcelona City Hall, which is also the headquarters of the Barcelona City Council. located in Plaça Sant Jaume in the Gothic Quarter, opposite the Palau de la Generalitat de Catalunya, which houses the regional government. The building had a medieval Gothic facade that was designed by the architect Arnau Bargués, which was built between 1399 and 1402. Joseph Massivilla designed the current neo-Gothic facade, built between 1830 and 1847, when the church that had the same name as the square was demolished. In 1823, Mas was commissioned to make a facade worthy of being oriented towards the Generalitat building from the Renaissance era. Most people use this small, quiet market to dine or have a coffee at the restaurants in this area, but in the Roman times, Jews and Christians came here to trade. In the 13th century, the church in the square, the Basilica dels Sants Justi Pastor, honors the two Roman martyr boys. The Gothic church stands on the site of the original 4th century Christian Basilica of Barcin. In front of the basilica, we found the San Just fountain, which was built in the 14th century in the Gothic style, where the cemetery of the Basilica of Saints Just and Pastor was located, and was rebuilt in 1861 in a neo-Gothic style. This fountain was created to pay tribute to Juan Fivaller, a Barcelona city councillor who during a hunting trip discovered a very important source of water in the hills of Collserola and promoted the project of channeling it towards the city. This brought water to the center of Barcelona, which desperately needed it. The fountain had 3 taps included in the faces. At the last remodeling, it was slightly changed and now has 2 taps located between the faces. And at the top of the fountain, we can see a sculpted image of Saint Just holding the palm of a martyr in one hand. Currently, the water is from the public network. We found the Temple of Augustus in Barcelona, a Roman temple built in the imperial period in the Barcino colony, today's Barcelona. The temple was the central building on the Taber Hill, currently at number 10 Carrer de Paradis, in the city's so-called Gothic district. The dedication of the temple to Augustus is not proven. Against the perfect background created by the ancient Roman walls of Barcelona and the medieval royal palace, we meet Count Ramon Berenguer III, the ruler of Barcelona between 1097 and 1131, who managed to reunite most of the Catalan provinces. He's immortalized in a royal pose, riding his horse Dunk, through a life-size bronze equestrian statue sculpted by Frederic Mares. An undulating, brightly colored roof attracts us like bees to a flower, and we approach it to discover a food market. In the St.Catherine Square, hidden under this roof made of colorful and shiny ceramic tiles that form a mosaic, the Mercat de Santa Caterina in Barcelona has an original design. The endless aisles of stalls offering fresh products, prepared dishes, artisanal products and crafts do not disappoint visitors. And this is not from today or from yesterday, as we can see from the photos exhibited, with the farmer stalls from yesteryear and from the images that present the market through its history. At the southern end of the square, we come across the historical ruins of the 11th century monastery that once occupied this site. The ruins were excavated as part of an archaeological excavation that aimed to preserve the city's past. we're going to see the memorial Triumphal Arch of Barcelona, which was built by the architect Josep Villasecas y Casanovas as the main gateway to the 1888 World Exhibition in Barcelona. The arch crosses the wide central promenade of the Passeig de Lluís Companys, which leads to the Ciutadella Park, that now occupies the site of the World Exhibition and which is located at the northern end of the promenade, overlooking the Passeig de Sant Joan. The arch has 4 friezes. The one on the side from which we're coming is called the Reward and represents the awarding of prizes to the participants of the World Exhibition. The frieze on the opposite side is called Barcelona Receives the Nations, and on the sides the smaller friezes are representations of agriculture and industry on one side and science and arts on the other. The arch is built of reddish brick in the neo-Mudéjar style. The 2 pillars of the arch feature bats carved in stone, the emblem of King Jaume I, who reigned in a period of prosperity for Barcelona. Near the Triumphal Arch we found the Castle of the 3 Dragons, in Catalan Castell dels Tres Dragons. This is the popular name given to the modernist building constructed between 1887 and 1888, which was a cafe-restaurant for the Universal Exhibition of Barcelona in 1888. This name was probably adopted from the 1865 play by Serafí Pitarra. In its time, it was one of the main buildings of the exhibition, facing the Palace of Fine Arts, which no longer exists. It is at the end of the main street that went from the Arch Triumph to the Parc de la Ciutadella. The Parc de la Ciutadella, or the Fortress Park, is located on the northeastern edge of the district of Ciutat Vella. For decades after its creation in the mid-19th century, this park was the only green space in Barcelona. The 31 hectares include the city zoo, Palau del Parlament de Catalunya, a small lake, museums, and a large fountain designed by José Fonteres, with possible contribution from a young Antoni Gaudí. In 1714, during the War of Spanish Succession, Barcelona was besieged for 13 months by the army of Philip V of Spain. The city fell, and to maintain control over it and prevent Catalans from rebelling, as they had done in the previous century, Philip V built the fortress of Barcelona, at that time the largest fortress in Europe. A substantial part of the neighborhood, called La Ribera, in which the citadel was built, was destroyed to obtain the necessary space for its construction, leaving its inhabitants homeless. Hundreds of Catalans were forced to work on its construction for 3 years, while the rest of the city provided financial support for it and for war-related expenses, with a new tax called El Cadastre. 3 decades later, a quarter was rebuilt around the fortress called Barceloneta, which is located in the Ciutat Vella district. In 1841, the city's authorities decided to destroy the fortress, which was hated by the citizens of Barcelona. However, 2 years later, in 1843, under the regime of Maria Cristina, the fortress was restored. In 1848, after Maria Cristina's abdication, and as the fortress lost its use, General Espartero destroyed most of the buildings inside the fortress, as well as its walls, bombing it from the nearby mountain fortress Montjuïc, which helped him gain political popularity. By 1869, as the political climate liberalized enough to allow this, the first general decided to hand over to the city what was left of the fortress, and some buildings were demolished as it was seen by the citizens as a much-hated symbol of the Spanish central government. The chapel, now the military parish church of Barcelona, the government's palace, now the Verdaguer Secondary School, and the arsenal, now the seat of the Catalan parliament, have been preserved to this day, the rest of the site being transformed into the contemporary park, through which we're walking today, by the architect Josep Fontserès in 1872. 19 years later, in 1888, Barcelona organized the extravagant Exposición Universal de Barcelona, inspired by the mayor Ruiz y Taulet, and the park was redesigned with the addition of sculptures and other works of art. This marked a turning point in Barcelona's history, going from being an old, provincial and non-progressive city to being a modern and cosmopolitan one. From that time until 1892, half of the park's layout was again improved to get enough space for the zoo, which we will soon be heading towards. The waterfall in the park, next to which we are now, is called the Gloria de la Transexual Sonia and is dedicated to a transsexual woman, Sonia Rescalvo Zafra, and her tragic end due to the right-wing extremists on October 6, 1991, in this place. The waterfall is located in the northern corner of the park, opposite the lake. And was first inaugurated in 1881 without sculptures or minute details, and was therefore criticized by the press, after which this triumphal arch at the top of the waterfall was completely modified by adding a fountain and minor attributes, which required 6 years of construction from 1882 to 1888. And since then it has been exhibited at the Universal Exhibition, and so far it hasn't been redesigned. The fountain was erected by Josep Fontserès and to a small extent by Antoni Gaudí, who at the time was still an unknown student of architecture. Fontserès set out to make it resemble the Trevi fountain in Rome. Two enormous giant crab claws serve as stairs for ascending to a small podium located at the center of the monument. In front of it was placed a sculpture designed by Venanzi Valmigiana, a Venus standing on an open shell. In the park, we also found a small botanical garden. And from here we're going to the Barcelona Zoo, which is located, as I was telling you earlier, in the Ciutadella Park. The zoo was inaugurated in 1892, on the day of Mercè, the patron saint of the city. The first animals were donated by Luis Martí Codolar to the municipality of Barcelona, which gratefully approved their accommodation in the zoo. Currently, with one of the most important collections of animals in Europe, the zoo states that its purpose is conservation, investigation, and education. From 1966 to 2003, the zoo was home to the famous albino gorilla Snowflake, which attracted many international and local tourists. Apart from the usual visits, the garden offers different types of guided tours or other activities, such as, for example, 20 types of various workshops, trips and excursions for school children, or training and educational courses for staff in zoology for adults. More than 50,000 children visit the zoo annually, which is why the zoo emphasizes education. The first animals came from the private collection of Luis Martini Codolar, and one of these first animals was an Asian elephant, which was the only one that the zoo had in those years, and that became very popular. Despite being a female, she was known as Grandpa, a distortion of her original name, Bobby. She was the star of the zoo until May 3, 1914, when she suffered complications due to a fracture in her left front leg. She was replaced on May 5, 1915 by the elephant Julia, a gift from Moulay Hafid, the deposed Sultan of Morocco, who made Barcelona his home. Julia was the elephant of the zoo until the Civil War, on August 12 or 13, 1938, when she suffered from lack of food and finally fed part of the population of Barcelona. Between 1966 and 2003, the most emblematic animal of the zoo was Snowflake, the only albino gorilla known to date. Also very popular was the orca Ulysses, who was at the zoo from the time he arrived here at the age of 2 in 1983 until he left in 1994, as the facilities were not large enough to accommodate him properly. In 2009, work began on the remodeling of the zoo, with the new marine zoo, which was expected to divide the facilities into terrestrial and marine habitats, but the proposal was later blocked due to the financial crisis from that period. The first zoological collections appeared as evidence of the wealth of the monarchs. In Asia, Emperor Wu already had a zoo around his imperial palace in 1150 BC. Some medieval monasteries housed exotic animals from donations. The gift of beasts was common among European nobility. In Barcelona, lions and other exotic animals have been kept in the Palau Real Menor and Palau de la Reina since the 14th century. At the end of the 19th century, Luis Martini Codolar created his own zoological collection, and in the spring of 1892 he offered it to the Barcelona City Council. The mayor at the time, Manuel Porcar, approved the purchase of the animals and their subsequent exhibition in a public enclosure in the Park de la Ciutadella. The municipal assembly approved its establishment on April 26th of the same year, and on May 19th the works for adapting the space would begin. Francesc d'Assis Darde was in charge of organizing the zoological collection, and the municipal architect, Pere Falchesi Urpi, was in charge of the execution of the works. Finally, the zoo was opened to the public on September 24, 1892, coinciding with the Feast of Mercy. Although no opening ceremony was held, the animals that had been moved from the old farm were greeted with enthusiasm. The initial setup occupied a strip of about 200 meters in the Paseo de los Homs, now Carrer de Wellington. The animals were distributed in 3 large groups: primates, aquatic animals, and quadrupeds, following the recommendation of Manuel Miri Navarro, professor of natural science at the Institute of Secondary Education in Barcelona. Interestingly, one of the main initial sources of funding was the sale of eggs and chicks from the collection, as access to the zoo was free until the 1920s. 1894, the Casa de los Leones was built, and in 1897, the first catalogue of the zoological park was published. And 2 years later, in 1899, a complete informational file was made available. The animals were fed vegetables and food from a farm in Sant'Andreu. As the entrance was free, the park was financed by the sale of baby birds, eggs, and ducks, but also feathers, skins, and even animal droppings. Also, periodically, auctions of the animals they had in surplus were organized. Park was used by Franco's propaganda in the conquest of Barcelona, saying that the Reds ate some of the animals in the zoo during the Civil War. La Vanguardia on August 13, 1939 said, while Madrid was starving, the Red councillors plundered the zoo, sacrificing the animals. After the war, Antoni Riera Androed, a former worker at the center, became interim director of the zoo between 1934 and 1953. In 1944, a new elephant was purchased, named Perla, came from Hamburg, and lived here until 1951. In 1951, the Society of Friends of the Zoo was created. Even General Francisco Franco visited the facility on May 18, 1960. And with this walk through the Barcelona Zoo, today's video ends. Next time we'll see you again in Barcelona, and we'll continue our walk through the streets of this wonderful city. We'll go to see the aquarium, the History Museum of Barcelona, and some other important places that we will tell you more about next time. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel by smashing that subscribe button to find out when the next video from Barcelona drops. And if you like today's videos, like it and share it with others so that they can find out interesting things about the next place you're thinking of visiting. See you soon!